talk about stuff, but never about magnets. A pretty good show, and also fuck magnets. This is the show.
Hey everybody, today we are speaking with Ian K, one of the most important and influential producers in the Seattle hardcore and wider rave/EDM scene. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's great. Thanks for the awesome introduction. I'm humbled.
The Seattle scene is it's quite large, but it's also quite small.
Don't believe it. It's bigger inside than out.
Yes.
And I know when I think of kind of like people that are at the top of the scene we've built here, I think of, like Annika, Jiminy Cricket. I think of, like Flav. There's a whole list of people. KJ Saka, even though he's no longer in the area here. And I think of you. For as long as I can remember, you've been a headliner. You've been, playing huge shows. You've been producing a lot of big tunes. Where I'd like to start is understanding what made you pursue this crazy path and what got you into rave. What does it mean to you?
In terms of like my musical background, like I've played like musical instruments ever since I was a kid. So like I think it was fourth grade, I started playing clarinet. I played clarinet and bass clarinet all the way through high school. I played a little bit in drumline in high school in the marching band. And I started playing guitar when I was like, about like maybe 14, 15. And I played in a punk band in high school. And then I played in a ska band back in like the mid 90s and played in some kind of, math rocky post-hardcore stuff a little bit later. So I'd been in bands and in music kind of my whole life. But the electronic side of things really came from I was in 7th grade and my neighbor was a few years older than me. She was 16, had her license, and over the summer we'd go drive around and she played this tape and I was like what is, like, this music was so good, and it was the KLF's White Room album, and that album became like my obsession. Like first I dubbed it, dubbed a copy. I eventually bought like my own cassette of it and I wore that tape out. I mean, I was just like obsessed with it. And so that kind of got me interested in electronic music. And so once I started having friends that were involved with dance music, kind of around like my college years, that's when I got into production, DJing, Dummy is the one really who got me into that side of things. He taught me how to DJ. We used to go spin tracks at his place and buy records together. And then he took me to like the first rave I ever went to, which is more of like a club night, the first thing I ever went to, but, bigger and bigger events after that. And so they were DJing and I actually got started. We used to order tape packs from the UK and they all had MCs on them. And so I MC'd for Dummy, and we were kind of, he and I were the only ones really pushing like an act of like a DJ and an MC. And so that's kind of how I got my entry point into performing. And then eventually down the road got into DJing more.
MCing is interesting. So when you say MCing, do you mean rapping or do you mean like hyping the crowd?
A bit of both. I mean,
okay.
I am fully influenced by like the UK happy hardcore MCs like WizKid, Storm, Junior.
What is the lunatic called? Oogie, oogie, oogie. Oogie, oogie, oogie. You know. Like
a lot of that late 90s era stuff, Sharky. So some rhymes to hype the crowd, having some, lines to get the crowd interacting with you, and then a lot of like just crowd hyping and being kind of like, I always thought of it as I'm the liaison between the DJ and the audience. So I'm helping to convey to the audience what maybe the DJ who's kind of stuck behind the decks, like the excitement that they feel.
Right.
And then I'm trying to pass some of that energy from the crowd back to the DJ. At least that was my philosophy on it.
Yeah, MCing is a really interesting thing. It's like a legit skill that takes some work and some confidence. So did you have any moments where you were starting out and you like sucked at hyping the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, so I honestly, like, I got started just doing it when we were in the basement. So we'd be in the basement playing and, hey, give this a try. And like, we just go and, you have friends over and you kind of do that. So it was just kind of like a fun thing that we did. And then our first gig together, me and Dummy, was New Year's Eve 1999. I think it was like 98 to 99. And so that was like my first time ever like emceeing in front of like a crowd, an audience. And it was like, it was low stakes in a lot of ways. It was like, I want to say like 4 to 5 a.m. in the third room at FX. So, but there was like a good crowd of people, and like I had obsessively been listening to these tape packs from the UK. I had not had a chance to see like a hardcore MC in person, but through these tape packs you get a sense of like call and response, and like you learn the rules. And to me, like the number one rule is like I try to shut up over any vocal. Like I don't want to interrupt the hook of the track. But when the energy is going up, it's like you want to give the crowd permission to get excited. And it's like a communal thing. Like I'm up here getting excited, you get excited. And so kind of the combination of like just being hyped to do it, getting like a lot of practice in at home. And then that wasn't my first time ever on stage, right? Like I'd been performing in like bands and stuff for a number of years up to that point. So it was, stage fright was different. It was still there. And Dummy can tell you some funny stories. Like for the first like year, I used to like get sick. Like I see almost like I'd vomit before shows. I was so nervous.
Whoa.
But then it's like, that was like our sign, right? Okay, got it out of the system. Let's rock and roll. Like, let's go.
That's amazing. Because I've always thought you were just like the chillest, most confident guy.
Well,
like you're just existing on stage. Like I mean, you're bringing energy. You're performing, but it feels almost like you're just continuing to live your normal life when you're on stage. Like you've always seemed so comfortable up there.
I'm glad it comes across that way, but like the reality is even to this day, like, I mean, over the years, I've kind of narrowed it down. Like I'm not puking before every show or anything, but I do have like a routine I go through before every show to kind of like get myself centered, if that makes sense, and kind of like get into a moment of like there's all this stuff that happened before, but that doesn't affect what I'm about to go do. So now let's just go and do it. And that having a routine around that really allows me to transition from, this sounds really cheesy, but it's like transition from me being who I am every day to who I am on that stage for 60 minutes or for a couple hours.
I got made fun of by a good friend of mine because I was talking about this like shamanic element of DJing, and he was like, that's ridiculous. But I think it's something that if you're in the culture, you understand, because what you're describing is like a liminal state. I was just reading about this last night. You get removed from your normal life. Now you're like a ritual figure. You're no longer like a normal person. You're playing a role inside of a ritual, and then it ends, and then you return to your life, right?
Yep.
And And that's really interesting that you brought that up. That's cool. What do you think of that idea? I'm like, you've heard this, right?
Yeah, like I'm all for it, and I think there's kind of a spiritual way you can look at that in terms of like you say, kind of in the shamanistic tradition. But in another way, I sometimes think about it is like Zen and flow state. Like when I'm in like the right frame of mind to get myself there, and when it's like at its best, what I'm always aiming for when I DJ, anytime I'm on stage, anything like that, is like I'm not trying to think about what I'm doing. I'm just in that state of flow where I just know what I'm going to do next, and I'll take risks and I'll do things that like I just want to try to not be routine and like thoughtful necessarily, but more of like, I'm here in this moment, so what does this moment need right now? And there's an immediacy to DJing, especially where it's like, I can tap into that right now. Like, you're interacting with the crowd and seeing what feeds into the crowd, and it could be by the second track, I know that what I wanted to play maybe third, that's got to go out the window. And I think that that's kind of part of like what I think what you're talking about is like there's this role where we're part of this experience. There's a give and take between what I'm doing and what the audience is doing, and we're giving each other energy. And my role is almost to like get out of the way consciously, you know, and like not put too much of myself in there, but really be about like what can we do in this moment. I've always said like being a DJ especially is like the luckiest thing in my mind, because you never know that moment, that night, that set could be that moment for some kid out there. Because I think a lot of us that are into this culture, we've had that moment, you know, where it's just like that oh my God moment. Maybe you have it often, maybe it happens once in a while, but it's like, as a DJ, I owe it to that potential person out in the crowd to like allow that moment to happen or help facilitate that happening.
The first time I had that moment, it was Ben Jordan, the flashbulb. And it was a moment where everyone was outside and he was playing. He was on his guitar and he was doing some like live stuff. And they had put these tarps everywhere and they were going up and down with the wind to the beat. And everyone was just grooving. And it was like, you just locked into this moment where everyone felt like they were part of this organism. Mm-hmm. And that was the moment for me when I was like, whoa, like, I'm not certain I can really live without this anymore. Yeah. So I guess that's why I'm sitting in a room full of all this stuff now.
Yeah. It feeds into it, right? Like in a lot of ways, like I have to be mindful of like, the pursuit of that can't come at the expense of everything else, because I think especially, you know, there's just a tendency to be like, I got to have that all the time. And it's like those moments are special. And if I go trying to make them happen for myself, like I don't really know, but the best I can do is just like do my best to help allow those moments to happen, you know?
Right. So you mentioned, like Zen Buddhism, and you talked about getting out of your own way and sort of letting the moment happen. That sounds like a meditator. Do you meditate?
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that?
Probably, I want to say like about the last 10 years or so, where I do it really as like a purposeful thing. And I go through, as all things, like I go through phases where I maybe utilizing it a lot more than others, but I try to make it somewhat of a part of my routine. And the way I kind of look at it is like for all the different things that we do day to day and all the different directions we get pulled, like I can give myself a minute. I can give myself, 2 minutes, to try to not have like, my anxieties, my fears, my concerns, my worries up at the front of my mind, all the pressures or the external forces, and kind of get to a state of like, what's a baseline that's comfortable where I don't have all these things in the front of my consciousness. They're there, I acknowledge them, but I can give myself a minute, running a lot. I use running a lot. I think of it as meditation. When I go running, oftentimes I don't wear any headphones or anything. So when I'm out on the trail and I'm jogging, it's like all that it is like left, right, left, right, left, right, the same motion over and over again. And that's all I'm thinking about. And I try to use that as a practice too, for when I'm like thinking about this and the mind is going a million miles an hour and I'm thinking about this, and I'm going to do that. It's like, well, hold on a second. I've got this time, just me and this road in front of me. Let's just let go of all that for a little bit and just focus on the physical movement of left and right, moving forward. And, we'll get to that when we got to get to that.
For sure. Do you think making music is part of your meditation or spiritual practice? Like, is it therapy?
You'll be hard pressed to find somebody in that role who doesn't have something that they're wrestling with, emotionally, psychologically. And so I think for a lot of us, music becomes this process by which we can work through that. When I was 15 and I was in a punk band, it's like we're wearing our hearts on our sleeves about like how we feel. And I think looking back, it was really healthy for me to have a healthy way for me to express that. Maybe it's not like, speaking with the therapist, although I've done that and I advocate for that. Anyone who feels like they'd benefit from that, I've used it myself. But I think there's times in my life where music and the act of creation has been a way for me to work through things that I'm feeling, places that I'm feeling maybe stuck emotionally, or just sometimes too, it's just the act of creation. Sometimes the act of like sitting down to a blank slate and creating I'll feel better after doing that, instead of struggling with that. So, but yeah, I mean, I find the process very like healthy for me to do.
Are you a Tolkien fan?
Yeah.
Okay. So Tolkien had this concept. It was very central to his work as a writer and also themes inside of his writing, which is this idea of sub-creation. So of course he was a devout Catholic, but his idea was that we exist in a creation, and then there's something holy or something spiritual about the act of creation within creation. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the characters that he wrote about, like the dwarves and like Aule, the god of smithing, that was what they represented, is just the joy of creating a thing without ego. Mm-hmm. And I think he's onto something. I think there is something just wholly nourishing and like transcending about the process of creation. Sorry, I'm a massive Tolkien nerd, so like I will drop any opportunity. I will inject some Tolkien into a talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I can only speak for myself, but I feel like I don't know what I would do with like just with myself if I didn't have any outlet for creativity. But sometimes it's music, sometimes it's other things, so it's like at least for me, I feel that the act of creating is something that just brings like happiness into my life. So why wouldn't I want to bring more of that in?
What other things do you do besides make music? Like what other creation?
I'm into like I have a fun time with like microcontrollers and LEDs.
Cool.
I'm into electronics and stuff. So like a number of years back, I've made like art projects for Burning Man or been a part of, art cars and stuff, like small little art cars. But yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky. Like, I think I picked this up from my dad, but like, I just have like a joy of like doing things with my hands. So, music production is great. I'm just fidgeting with stuff all the time. DJing is great. I'm just working with my tools, right? But I also enjoy like, building a little thing. When we moved into this house, like the desks and stuff that we have in here, like I just built them out of like, lumber store wood, because they don't have to look great. For me, I like just the functionality, but I like just, hey, if I can just do something myself, maybe I'll just make something. I wanted to get some LEDs that hang in our window, and it's like you can go buy some off the shelf stuff, but I like bought an ESP32 and learned a little bit about WLED, and just use it as an opportunity just to kind of learn some new skills. So I love tinkering. So
Do you have any particularly good memories and any particularly bad memories about your rave journey?
Yeah, in terms of good memories, I mean, thousands and thousands of good memories. I mean, I think the good memories outweigh all the negatives, and I always kind of told myself if the negatives outweigh the positives, like that's when it's time to bounce. But I mean, I think like I'll never forget like the first time I played, like the first time I got booked to play Sakura Con, getting to play for a crowd where it was just such a different crowd than the normal like rave crowd. There was a lot of people there who might not otherwise explore that kind of thing, kind of have permission to do that at Sakura Con. Especially the dances are such like a big event there, and if you are there at the con, you're welcome to show up and dance. And so it's a very cool and welcoming environment. So seeing people have a lot of fun to that, I was like, oh, this is how this can feel. That this is how big of an impact you can make on somebody's experience. And like I've been super lucky. Like I say this all the time. Like I've gotten to play at Sakura Con every year since then, and it is just my favorite show to play every year. That is the best show I play every year. That is the show I look forward to the most. And it's a lot of it is just because it's a ton of my friends. It's a ton of artists that are there that I love. It's a community that I love. The geeky anime folks are like my people, right? So it's like such a fun weekend. And then since I've gotten to do it so many years, it's like just become this part of my life. And so, I think those shows are probably up there with like some of my favorite memories. But I mean, there's so many good ones, right? Like getting to play HTID in the sun in Spain. It was like, I was just talking with No Left Turn about this a couple weeks ago. Like there was one year where he and I went, we played together, and we were roommates the whole time. And it's like one of the best life experiences I've ever had. It's something that like has become so foundational to like what drives me to do what I do and who I am these days from that one week.
So for people watching this who might not know, is Hardcore Till I Die in the Sun a big event?
I'd say it's a large event in that it is, in terms of crowd size, I mean, it's like a really, really nice club size amount of people. But you take over this club, HID takes over this club for 7 days. And so 7 nights of hardcore, and it's like all the top names in the business and people you'd always wanted to see, and they're all in one place. But on top of like the shows every night, all day there's like yacht parties and boat parties and foam parties and water park parties, and you're just in this little tourist town, Lorette de Mar. And it's funny because it's like I've mentioned it to people and people are like, oh, that place is kind of janky. But it's like I have such happy memories of it because it was like, it's this beautiful town. It's a tourist town on the sea, on the water in Spain. And it's the sun, it's the fun, it's the music. And then the town is overrun by like ravers who all love hardcore. Like it's everybody you run into has a wristband and they're there for hardcore.
Did you you shared billing with Scott Brown one year, right?
Yeah, well, I've MC'd for Scott here in the States, and then
Wow.
yeah, I mean, when we played over at HCID, like there was a lot of big names we got to like hang out with and play
Yeah.
before and after.
I mean, he among, like, there's several names where I'm just like, these are legends.
Mm-hmm.
These are like, I mean, it's almost like the Beatles of hardcore music or something. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I would have a hard time staying normal among some of these people. I'd be kind of freaking out.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about Sharky. I've known Sharky for a number of years now, but like we've had some like awesome nights in Spain and, awesome time, like hanging out and getting to hear stories, or he's come over to our house here in the States. And it's like, how do I explain to somebody how cool it is that Sharky is telling us like rave stories from back in the day, and we're just like hanging out in my basement,
Did you ever play at NAF? Were you around for
Yeah.
NAF days?
Yeah, I got to play a few times at NAF. I played there, I want to say about like maybe 6 or 7 times in the last like few years that it was running. In fact, my first DJ performance I ever did was actually before I MC'd, and it was with Dummy at NAF, like the summer, I think it was like the summer of 97? No, it's summer of 98. So
Super cool. Yeah, that's like my litmus test to if someone is like really the old school Seattle. I mean, that was before my time. I'm quite a bit later on the scene, but NAF is kind of like a legend that just gets passed down.
yeah.
Back when the kids wore visors and fat pants and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. There's a group that I'm in online, and it's old school ravers who remember NAF and FX. And it's like, people will just post pictures. It's like, God, I remember that hallway. Like I never thought I'd be nostalgic for a hallway, but there it is. And the way that the venue was set up was just like very like embedded in your mind. Like you've been there enough times. And I only played there a handful of times, but I've been there a bunch. And it's just like, it's funny because I don't think you appreciate it in the moment, but looking back, it's just like, man, that was a banger venue.
Yeah. I used to get choked up just driving by Motor. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, all the memories.
Yeah.
What? These are really, here's some broad questions.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about beauty and truth in art?
Beauty and truth.
And what?
I mean, I think beauty is in the eye of I'd say in the eye of the creator. If whoever is behind that creative act, if they feel that it's beautiful, then that's what it is. That was their intention to put out there. And like, hopefully every artist can feel at some point like that confidence about what they put out there. I know there's, for every artist, there's second guessing yourself and like doubting your skills. But I think what I've learned, or at least what I hold on to, is I think the intention is really what's important, and if your belief is like, this is great and this is beautiful, then you should be proud of that and like accept that as truth for yourself. And everybody else's opinion is feedback, and you can choose to incorporate that or not.
Interesting. The reason I ask is when I think about like there's some genres where I just immediately I'm like, oh yes, this is about beauty, right? So I think about like, you know, like classical piano concertos or I don't know, whatever Amon Tobin is up to.
Then I can go back and pitch the 259 through a spectral processor at 296 before going into a 292C low pass gate with a sort of amplified sound.
It's like, this guy is like, he's going, I'm going to make a beautiful thing. But then you put on a punk record, right? Or you put on Gabber. And I just wonder, I'm like, is beauty the kind of like the goal? Is this in the mindset? Is this the process? Or is something else going on? Is it more of like, I want to express a truth, or I want to create maybe like create an experience that's beautiful in other people? Like I'm just wondering like how the focus changes based on genres.
I don't.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know if it has. I mean, I don't know if I could split it up by genre, because I think like a Gabber producer is wanting to create the most beautiful interpretation of that sound that they have envisioned, much the same way that like a classical composer might have a vision and they want to express that to the best of their ability. So I think ultimately it's like, if there's like honest intention behind the music, you know, you're expressing yourself, and not, I guess what I'd say is like, if it's just mechanical and it's rote and it's not got soul or meaning to you, that is where maybe I'd make a distinction. But I think that's more about in the intent of the artist or the creator versus like the genre. I think the truth and beauty, I think you could argue is like, I guess I'd say that even the most like out there breakcore producer is doing that because they find that beautiful. And even though somebody else listening to it is just like, there's nothing beautiful about this, like maybe from a third perspective, it's that artist's intent that to me, I think is like the important part of the recipe.
Mm-hmm. I'm working on a video about AI right now, AI art specifically, and I guess like, spoiler, my conclusion is that AI can't make art because art only occurs when there's like a sharing of emotions or like kind of the inner secret world between people. And of course AI, until AI is like, I'm alive, like it's not like really alive, which I don't know how we'll even measure.
Yeah.
But until that happens, I don't think it can make art. You know, the most it can make is like a picture or some sounds, but it can't really make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of it as like any other tool, right? It as it stands now, I don't see it being a be all end all, like that it begins and ends solely within like an AI process. Who knows? Maybe we'll get there at some point, and who knows what that'll sound like. I'm sure somebody's already made a good attempt, but I do think that like those tools can be tools to somebody with the right skill set to utilize it. And I guess like the way I would look at it is like, there's a lot of talk, you know, of concern with like generative AI, like prompt based like artwork. But I think that same technology allows like a filmmaker to have maybe an easier editing process, or of somebody who does artistic work in Photoshop to be able to speed up their process. It's not replacing their artistic vision, they are utilizing a tool to help speed their process up. And I think that's a distinction people will be talking about, I think, more and more as this, technology progresses.
Yeah. Generate a 5-minute hardcore track in the style of Ian K.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be easy. Just major key it out and build a bunch of ARPs and generative yourself into a lead, and you're probably 90% there.
I don't know, man. I've tried to make hardcore. It's hard. It's a difficult, at least for me. I have I just started like a hard dance project, but I'm really bad at hard dance, like it's going to take me a little time to like boot up the thought process behind it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that I've always loved about hardcore is that it by understanding hardcore, I feel like I can take what I know about that and then apply that to my learning about other genres in a way that I think can sometimes be difficult for people to go the opposite direction. Like if you don't really wrap your head around hardcore in terms of like, again, like the intent behind it, like what this style of music, kind of where it fits, it can be hard to understand. Like from an outsider, it just sounds like noise. It sounds like it's too fast. It sounds, like repetitive. But I think that there's to the folks that have a love and a passion for it, they're able to understand it in a way where it's like this is the best way for me to express what I want to express.
I remember reading about I think it was someone in Rolling Stone, is like some writer for Rolling Stone. They reviewed some album of rave music. And this is when rave first started. Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, it's okay. It's fine. And they were listening to tracks separately. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, that same writer went to a rave and he saw it in the proper context. So in this warehouse, DJs, crowd, probably back in those days, people with whistles and all of that. And then he went and he wrote again and he's like, okay, I'm going to change my rating because I wasn't listening to this properly. Mm-hmm. Like this wasn't the right place for me. Like he was sitting in his living room on like, a stereo system, like intellectualizing about, probably breakbeat hardcore or something, and
yeah,
just doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I love about hardcore, and I'll kind of also lump in like all like everything under the umbrella of dance music, is it's like at its best when it's in the environment that it's I don't want to even say designed for, but like where it fits best, right? Like the lights, the sound, the crowd, the artists interacting with you, the feeling, that electricity of a night out. I think that all is a part of like the enjoyment of it, at least for me. That's what I love most about it. And like I use that as kind of part of my my barometer in my creative process, is like when I'm working on a track, I'll like step back from the desk and turn off the lights a little bit and like how does this feel like when I take the sterileness of my studio out of the picture a bit and I start to envision this in like the kind of venue I'd play it in or for a crowd. Can I picture, because if I can't picture the crowd loving it in that environment, then like that might impact like my decision of what I want to do, or I might recognize this needs more of something here or less of something here. Yeah.
Good friend of mine, Subaqueous. He's more in like the hippie scene. He used to have recordings of crowd noise that he would put on while he was making a track.
Yeah.
And like close his eyes and like, and I think that's a really interesting,
Shut it down.
way of, whoa, there goes one of my lights.
Battery pack.
Yeah, I thought it was. I'll be right back. Give me 1 sec.
It's intermission. Rise and stretch time. Time to refresh yourself and visit our snack bar. Got a yen for hot popcorn? Your favorite soft drinks are sparkling cold. The juicy Frank sizzling hot. There's delicious coffee, freshly brewed, and all kinds of ice cream and candy to tempt you. It's showtime, folks. Enjoy the show.
I did listen to your discography.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's really great music.
Thank you.
It lots of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's 100% hardcore.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love it. Yeah.
Rad.
Hardcore is great for driving too.
Mm-hmm.
Although I had to stop listening to it when I was driving.
You get a little like speedy, right? Like
I got a ticket one time.
Yeah.
And like the cop was like, "Why are you going so fast?" I was like, "Well, I was listening to this, you know." And he's like, "Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
Well, stop it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been on some incredible road trips where like the bonkers CDs were like the soundtrack, and definitely it impacts your your driving a bit sometimes.
Yeah.
It's supposed to hype you up. That's
Yeah, it works. It works really well. What advice do you have for people that want to make energetic, fucking get you going, knock you on your ass kind of music?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only prerequisite is that you love the music. I mean, I think that has to be, I think, at the core of it. If you have a genuine love for that sound and you're like passionate about it and you feel the urge to like, I want to contribute to this in some way, like I say, like, you know, that's your signal to jump in and at least give it a try. You know, I mean, every single producer has started off with like, oh, this is kind of cool. I kind of want to dip my toes in that, right? Like from the biggest names to the smallest names, like all of us kind of had that bug. So what I always tell people now is like, if you think you have an interest in it, you know, now with the technology we have is the best time in the history of electronic music to want to experiment with it. Because even back when I got started, like there was, when I was first learning production in hardcore, it was on kind of the tail end still of like the hardware era.
The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with a panametric fan. The lineup consisted simply of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal vanes, so fitted to the ambifacient lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented.
Where everything was on hardware synths, and here's an actual 303 and here's an actual Novation, you know, and all, you know, we've got our compressors and, you know, all this stuff. And so for somebody who was just kind of curious, that's a tough barrier to entry. You got to like book some time or maybe know somebody. Yeah. If you want to buy it, it's like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just for the gear, just to get started. And then you have to learn how to use it. Whereas now, I think, you know, FL Studio, I recommend to folks as like a very like easy way to get into it. You know, Ableton is like my, you know, platform of choice. But all of these different tools like Bitwig and Cubase and Logic, there's a lot of options out there that give you all of these tools. Like the whole rack of hardware can be done all in software on on most computers, most laptops. So that barrier to entry is lower. And so I always say to people, like, if you're interested, just start learning, just jump right in. Deconstruct stuff that you like. That's one of the techniques I think that I learned early on that I still use to this day, is like, get really good at listening to the music that you're wanting to, create, and build your skills in breaking that down. What is it organizationally? It's 16 of this and then 16 of this, and then this comes in. Like, I used to, back in the day, make Excel spreadsheets of elements of songs so I could like look at it visually. These days now I just I do a lot more of that in my head, but it's like, okay, this comes in at this point, so, and that adds energy. Okay, so something like that. Or, I always say, like, kind of learning to navigate a song. What are the sections? What are the parts? And once you understand that, then like that's kind of helping you define your canvas, and then you can start painting within that canvas, right? And I understand kind of the format of the songs. Great. Now I can jump in and start working on, I always tell people, if you're starting to write something new, start with your breakdown and your like main like drop section, the high energy section. Start kind of somewhere around there. And if that transition you can get sounding good, you can expand the whole track from there. But oftentimes it just starts, I think people get hung up on, I've got to write a song. And I used to do that early on. Like, I wouldn't want to sit down to write something until I had a fully formed idea. But like nowadays, like when I work in the studio and I'm on like one of my idea generation riff writing days, it's, okay, I've got like a breakdown idea, or I've got like a drop lead idea. I'll start with that. And then, so I've got just 16 bars of that. Okay, if I've got a good drop section that I like, what needs to come before that? A nice little, build up section. Does that build energy? Okay, now that I've got that, what does it need before that? Or maybe I start with, I've got this idea for a breakdown, and then it builds up. And then you get to where the drop is going to happen, and now you've got to come up with something. So like, just the act of coming up with these little parts of the song allow you to then start fleshing it out. And I encourage people to experiment with that. Experiment with short, small, simple ideas first. And then if you love it and it's clicking with you, you can expand that out into a full track. But start with idea generation, just idea generation, and creating something that feels like the energy of the genre that you're wanting to produce.
That makes sense. One of the things that I've learned is that I think a lot of people, when they start out, they aren't willing to throw out, like, to just abandon a thing fast enough.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think for me, one of the things that's changed is I have thousands of hours of just little loops and things that I'm like, this wasn't the thing.
Yeah.
But I think that's almost like your day job, and then like every now and then one of those grows and it becomes like a...
Yeah. Yeah. Like it hits or it hooks you and you're like, oh, that's it right there. That one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I've got folders and folders of 16, 32 bar ideas that might never see the light of day to anybody. And it's just part of my creative process where, hey, it's Monday, it's riff writing day. I'm going to write 16 bars of something. I'm going to write 32 bars of something.
How organized are your days? Like, you have a riff writing day, and like, is it, what do you do for your day job, or are you full-time?
No, I have a day job. I do, what's the best way I can describe it? I do quality analytics for a very large corporation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a very analytical mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm starting to get a bit more of a picture. So do you have it broken down like riff writing day, preset day? Like is it all spaced out like that?
Yeah, it might not always be like the same. I'm not so much in a routine that it's always riff day on Monday. But a lot of the times it's like, at the end of one week or the start of that week, it's like, okay, what are my tasks? What are the things I want to work on this week musically? Okay, this week I want to work on like I said, like chords and a riff. Just start with some chords, come up with the riff, and that's my creative endeavor. And I might say I also want to work on some sound design. Maybe that's hey, I really want to get some cool like new bass sounds. I really want to dial in my lead stack. I'm always tinkering with my lead stack, making multiple versions of it. Other times it's just like I want to write something dumb, or I have just like a dumb idea, so I just got to like get it out of my head. So I'll make like a stupid remix or just do like a little fun thing, and it's just like bang 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 bang. Like I've got. I kind of think of them as starter kits, but like you use Ableton, like the template system in Ableton is like life-changing to me, where it's like
it's amazing.
I've built over, the last couple of years, like these starting points where I don't have to go in and write all of my kicks and all of my basses. Like I've got these beds, and then I go in and like apply that MIDI to whatever kick I want to use or whatever bass I want to use, choose all of my percussion. And it might not ever be what the final thing is, but it means that when I'm feeling creative, I don't ever have to take the time to program out kick drums to start.
Yeah.
I'll always go back and like kind of rework them, do better sample selection. But when I'm in the creative mindset, I just want to get in and create and not do the mechanical stuff. There's going to be time for that when I've determined that this is a good idea, but I need to make sure it's a good idea first. The other thing that I'll often do outside of sound design or writing is like, I'm really into tool building within Ableton. So, I took like it was like a seminar thing I took about a year and a half ago or so. And something they said really stuck with me. It's like, what if you could take 30 minutes of your day to create a tool in your software that saves you 5 minutes for the rest of your life? So take that time now to build something that saves you 5 minutes every time you do it. And so a lot of times I'll just sit down and be like, where's a roadblock in terms of my engineering flow or my production flow? Okay, what's a way that I can make that faster, easier, quicker, more of like, here's my solution. And again, then I can always come back and tailor it when I need to. But what can I do to remove any roadblocks from the creative part of writing?
I think this is actually a really good answer to a problem that I see with a lot of beginners. Like there's a lot of like gnashing of teeth when like I see people, they're like, oh, I don't have any ideas. What if I'm bad at this forever now? What if my last album was the only idea I ever had? And it's like, chill. Like, if you don't have any inspiration, if you're hating writing music, if you're hating getting some idea out there, just sit down and work on tools.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sound design, and like it'll come. Like,
There's been.
I think that's
go ahead.
Great advice. No. It's great advice. That's
I mean, I'm all about that because creativity and like the moment of inspiration isn't necessarily always a switch you can flip, right? For the lucky few that it is, like, there are those people who are like, they can like create a hit on a dime. Like those people do exist, but for the vast majority of us, it's, there's a time when that hits us, and it might not always be when I'm wanting to sit down on a Friday night to work on something, but the act of working on your tools, being within your production platform, working with it, gaining comfort with it. Like, I think that that's just as important as the creative side of things. I mean, that we live in a weird kind of time where I kind of think of it as like the bedroom producer becoming kind of more of like the norm. It wasn't always like that. For plenty of years in the recording industry, like an artist was an artist and an engineer was an engineer and the producer was a producer, and the producer is like maybe coaching an artist on how to do a performance.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3.
While the engineer is the one who's actually at their knobs. And we're in this kind of unique space where we're just doing it all ourselves. We're just,
right.
I've got to make the decisions on creativity. I've got to make the decisions on like this. And I've also got to be technically knowledgeable about using compression and clipping and stereo width and phasing. It's a lot to learn. So I always tell people too, just like get in there, work with the tools, make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, get into creative holes that are bad and figure out how to fix them, because once you get comfortable fixing problems, you're better at avoiding them, I think.
Right.
But just gaining comfort with your toolkit. The more that stuff becomes second nature, and that comes with just getting in and building tools or practicing compression or, testing out parts of your DAW. Those go hand in hand with the creativity, I think, and help elicit your creativity a little bit easier.
Do you know about the history of the drum kit?
It's funny. I think
Not a trick question.
I remember seeing there was like a YouTube thing I saw something on it years back, but it's not coming to mind for me.
It might be the same thing I saw, but basically every one of the drums on a drum kit was someone's individual job. And like slowly it was like, oh, we need to save costs, or like we need to reduce the expense of doing music. And so like these jobs all kind of merged together. And I think that's not unlike what's happening with production, or it's like, oh, okay, like, you need to be able to play the piano and understand music theory and percussion and sound design and engineering and recording. And it's like, it's a lot, but it's not that bad, to be honest. Well, it's like totally a hackable problem space.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there too. Like I've met a lot of people, and what I'll sometimes recommend to these artists is like, it's okay if engineering isn't your forte. If you're an excellent songwriter and you have great ideas for a great song, then much like a lot of other artists have, you can seek out and work with, and either work with like by partnering or work with by hiring engineers and producers who can help make your idea the best that it is. There's a lot of people within the dance music community that do that. I think it's something that people new to the process don't necessarily think about as an option. I just watched a video not too long ago by Laid Back Luke, and Luke took you into like his writer's camp, and he is working with singers, songwriters, producers to come up with ideas for what his next set of singles will be. It's a team effort with his artistic vision. And I think that there's a kind of this thing, this perfectionist thing that sometimes happens where it's like, you've got to do it all yourself. And I've fallen into that trap, where it's like, I'm so DIY or die. And I think that comes from like my background in punk rock is like, if I can do it all myself, I want to just do it all myself. I want to be able to do everything myself. But there's been times where like you recognize, like, I don't do my own mastering. I'm not a mastering engineer, you know. There's so I think there's people out there where it's like, maybe you love dance music, you're a great songwriter and a great idea generator, but maybe you can't wrap your head around engineering. That's okay. There's still a place for you at the table. And I encourage those folks to seek out like-minded people who can either fill those gaps or help them understand how to access those resources, to bring their artistic vision to life. Because if you have a good idea and you're talented at it, then like I say, just keep going for it.
Absolutely. This is sort of my dream or my vision, I guess, which is I feel like people have gotten a little bit isolated and like broken apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think being a little bit more tribal and coming together as almost these like creative teams or pods is really awesome. And not just in music, but like graphic designers and sculptors, painters, people that understand how to do like laser cutting and, you know, 3D printing. And I think this is where, well, like, for instance, you know, you can DJ and you can produce, but it takes like a whole team to put a show on.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And this is a big in hip hop, which is this idea of the elements, you know, the MCing, DJing, graffiti, dance, and something else. There's another one I'm forgetting, but like these all come together and you create this like ritual that everyone takes part in. And I think that gives scenes and artistic movements their longevity. And I guess that's one of the things I want to do, is to try and like foster that, you know.
Yeah
Big goal, but like, you know, I'll try my best.
Yeah, I mean, I really had some really positive experiences with communal creativity, not necessarily like kind of tangentially involved in music, but like I've been to Burning Man a number of times and like gotten to participate in like larger art projects and like being a part, like contributing my part towards this bigger thing can be really rewarding. And like there was a number of years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, Loop did, Power Mitten, and we were just like throwing ideas around about like this like cool art project idea that we both had. And then one year we got the opportunity to build it and take it out to the Gorge for Paradiso. And it was like, I brought my knowledge of like Ableton and how some of these tools, like specifically for us, it was these MIDI fighters that we were using. But that was in conjunction with a sculptor who made this crazy cool, like these art pieces that were incorporated, and then this lighting team and visuals team, and all making this cool little installation project where people could then come up and like interact with this art project in real time. And it's playing music, and it's essentially, I can get a little technical because I see you have Ableton up behind you, but there's the ability in Ableton to do follow actions at the end of clips. And so we utilized follow actions and a bunch of short clips of a bunch of different elements of music, that it was always this constantly evolving, changing, like musical thing that's happening, where it's the bass line is changing. There's a different beat that happens every 32 bars, and then a different like lead element, and they're swapping and changing at different times. And then people can walk up and like interact with it. Make it jump or change sounds, and there were MIDI Fighter 3D, so people could pick it up and interact. And like, it was just this really cool thing to see people have no idea what it was, walk up, play with it and interact, and kind of be like, oh, I tactile interaction with this big art project. And so like I could never do that on my own. You know, I it wasn't even fully my idea. It was like-minded creative people coming together, being like, here's these tools, here's these skills, here's this kind of idea of what we want to do. And I find that highly rewarding. You know, I think same applies for music, right? Like if the right songwriter connects with the right producer, I mean, magic happens, right? So I always say, seek out those creative partnerships if you think that you'd enjoy them.
I was wondering when you said you like to solder and make things. The thought I had was, do you ever work with Jay? Luke did.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah, he's a legit cool ass guy.
Yeah,
he's really a wonderful person. So shout out.
Yeah, big love to Power Mitten.
Yeah. All right, I want to go through these questions we got.
Yeah. Lay
Some
them
of
on.
them are spicy. So Scott M asks, Roman or Cody?
Oh,
He said you would know.
Yeah, I mean, hardcore all about Cody. Like, all about Cody Rhodes. Like, if you don't know, so it's a pro wrestling thing.
Okay.
And so it's this big storyline leading into WrestleMania this year. But yeah, I've been a big fan of Cody Rhodes. I'm a big AEW fan, which is kind of a competitor to WWE. So Cody founded that company, was one of the executive VPs, big name in the company, and then he left and went back to WWE. There's this whole history of like his dad was a pro wrestler and he worked for WWE and like all this stuff, and Cody and his older brother worked for WWE, and they kind of screwed them with their characters. So it's like this story that's going on for a long time, that's culminating right now. So yeah, Cody Rhodes all the way.
Okay, cool. Brett S says, why don't you give us hourly pictures of Bandit?
I probably could. That's my cat.
Is this your cat?
Yeah, it's my cat Bandit. I probably could. I looked in my photo tags on my phone, and I've got something like 3,200 photos of just my cat. You know, because
automation, man.
I don't know. I was never a cat person growing up. I was allergic to cats, actually. And then had a roommate a number of years back who had a cat, and I just like fell in love with him. And he was like a pretty sweet kitty. And so after we got married and got this house, it was like, okay, we'll get a cat. And yeah, I'm pretty obsessed with her.
Cool.
But as to why you don't get like hourly pictures, it's probably a lot of it's because I'm just not online that much these days.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna guess it's because you have other stuff to do, man. Like,
I mean, given the library I have, I could probably automate doing that an hour a day for a while, but
you should do that. I think that would be. I mean, that would make Brett happy.
Right.
Brent. Sorry. Okay. Chris S., what motivates you after all these years?
Yeah, what motivates me after all these years? I think like part of it is just I love doing it. Like I still love the act of creating music. I mean, for production specifically, it's like I can't imagine not doing this, and that's motivation enough, you know? And I think on like the performing side, like I definitely, I'm not out hitting the pavement like I was, 5, 10, 15 years ago or more. I think, that's not necessarily the best thing I can say is that like, it takes a lot of work to be consistently booked as a DJ. Like you've got to promote and you've got to put yourself out there, and it's a lot of work. And not to say that like, I don't love doing it, but like I've gotten to do a lot of that, and I accomplished a lot of the goals. I mean, almost all of the goals that I ever wanted to accomplish with DJing. And so like, I feel very content with my life. And so now it kind of gives me a freedom of like, I can accept the bookings that I want to accept and, play the shows, that look like they'd be fun. Whereas like early on, it's like, I never said no to anything. I'd play anywhere. and but even then it's like, the opportunity to have a moment to have a big impact on someone's night, to be the soundtrack of what could be the best night of their life or a big memorable night, that motivates me a ton. I mean, that's like why I'm excited about Sakura Con coming up after all these years, is like a chance to expose people to the music that I love and hopefully make a good impression. And
yeah. And I was like, for people watching, the best night or one of the most important nights of someone's life, that's not just like, those aren't just idle words, right? Like you met your wife through raves. Yeah. And so like actual legit life-changing stuff happens through these events. And I know people that were on a kind of like a suicidal, self-destructive path, and rave actually changed their lives. Yeah. It's like saved their lives. So it's not, I just want to kind of tagline, like that's real. It's not just marketing.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like, I mean, even, for myself, like early on, like, I guess not that early on, but like I went through a phase where like I was married before, when I was much younger, and was separating and going through a divorce and all of the, everything that kind of comes along with that emotionally. And it's like, I'm in this weird space of like, what am I doing and what's my direction in life and all that. And like, that was also around a time when things are really picking up for me DJ wise. And I really dove headfirst into that. And there were so many nights and moments that I had in those intervening months that like really helped turn things around for me in a real positive way, where it was like I felt like I had renewed focus and renewed like self-worth and value, and connecting with a community of people that were like-minded, and just kind of having an opportunity in a safe space to like work through all of this, and people who like cared about me. And so like, yeah, I mean, I think that experience really plays heavily into like my sense of like always wanting to give something back to the community. 'Cause like I had so much positive come out of it.
Nate G, what advice do you have for artists starting in 2024?
Yeah. I mean, I think number one is like, start getting comfortable with your tools, start creating, start iterating. Like I tell people all the time, there's kind of this ongoing joke amongst a lot of my producer friends where a number of years back, somebody hit me up online and they were kind of frustrated. They were like, well, hey, I bought, this software and I have, this synth, and no matter what I do, nothing I write, like it doesn't sound like Darren Styles. And I was like, well, there's no Darren Styles button. Darren is like a very accomplished songwriter, and like Darren, I think, is like a very skilled person at what they do, and you're just getting started. So give yourself a little bit of grace and understand that there is no immediate, like, there's no simple solution where you press a button and it sounds like a hit. It's going to take time. And what I'll always tell people is like, the first things that you create, you're going to be super excited about. And I want people to hold on to that excitement, but to also accept that it might not sound great by comparison to their heroes. And that's okay, because that first step where you're sounding not great is what allows you to take that next step to being a little bit better and a little bit better. And none of this happens overnight. I think that there's a sense that it can feel like I gotta go. I gotta be successful now. I gotta get started. And I gotta be at the level of the people who, have been doing this for years overnight. And I would just encourage everybody to like give yourself some grace and some patience to recognize it's a long road. I I have just started to feel fairly confident about a lot of what I do in the past, like 4 years, in terms of like I can go in and feel like I know exactly what I'm doing. For a lot of the time leading up to that, like I was still unsure of my skills because I knew how high the skill ceiling can go. And I know that where I'm at now, there's worlds above what I'm doing now. The skill ceiling is super duper high with this kind of thing. So just accept that, like, if you're wanting to do this, it might be a long road. You might turn out to be a prodigy. You might turn out to get some of this and intrinsically get it. And if you do, then like lock in on that and harness that skill set, because it's not there for everybody. But for the vast majority of folks, I think it's just, you got to learn to, what is it, like crawl before you walk, and you got to walk before you can run. You're building on the skill set of each project that you do. And so, yeah, like I say, iterate, create something, and then create something after that, and apply what you learned, and apply that, and be very self-critical, very willing to get your ego out of the way of like, I want people to like what I'm doing. Just seeking that out isn't going to help you grow as in your skill set as an engineer or producer.
Right. I think there's a like being able to like kind of like lightly hold the suck. Mm-hmm. Just like the it's not all fun trying to like express the truest, make the truest expression of your soul or something. Like that is like a path, and being able to just gently hold the parts of that are really shit and to accept it and move on. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I always say, as long as like you feel that the last thing you did was like growth and building on the thing that you did before, like that's part of the artistic process. And I think that's kind of what we're in it for the long haul on. Mm-hmm. And just this iterative step-by-step honing and improving of what you do. I feel like if you can learn to enjoy that process of it, as opposed to I've got to sound great from the outset, I think that kind of thinking can get you feeling disappointed quickly.
For sure.
Versus, like, I think if you understand it's a bit more of a long haul in terms of the skill development, it's easier to give yourself that patience and that permission to like suck a little bit and know that you have time to get better.
Yeah. And even the top people have moments where they are like, this isn't going great. Like it doesn't change. You just have the experience to not be caught up in it. You know, it's like, oh, okay, this isn't it right now. It's like, it's okay.
Yeah. We can move on, and tomorrow's another day to come up with another idea.
Thomas L. asked a bunch of great questions. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. I don't know if we want to do all of them, but they're all really good. So let me just list them out.
Yeah.
So the first is, how did COVID influence the stateside hardcore scene? 2 is, how has Twitch influenced closeness in the community? 3 is, what are your favorite stateside hardcore producers? 4 is, what is the future of hardcore? And 5 is, what do you feel about the current rave scene? So they're all great and big. So I don't know. We
can tackle them all, and I'll try to be not as verbose on them.
So we go like point by point.
Yeah. Let's hit me with the first one again.
Okay. So from Thomas L., how did COVID influence the stateside hardcore scene?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a really unique time in that it was an event that happened that I think caused a bunch of people to recognize the value of working collectively in a way maybe they hadn't before. And for the good and the bad, right? Like, I think that there were times when there was like struggle early on as people were figuring out how this all works. The money side of it can get, complicated early on as people were figuring that out. But I think over time, what happened is these groups and communities of people started coming together to find like ways to mutually support each other. Much in the same way that I think DJs will do in their local community, where they'll kind of crew up and form collectives and support each other through those lockdown, era. It was like that energy.
It was about 7 years.
Yes, it's
7 years of lockdown. No biggie.
But I think people started to apply that same approach and way of community building to an online existing in the online space. So I think a lot more people made connections with each other that might not have. I think a lot of people found like-minded individuals that they didn't necessarily know about before. So I think it raised the visibility of a lot of people that had just been kind of doing their thing all across the States. So I think like it was a group of people making the best out of a tough situation and finding a way to still have a sense of community. I think that that's a big important part of it for a lot of us, is just the community aspect. And so it allowed us to find new ways to build that community. And it's great to see that, for a lot of these folks, myself included, it continues, to this day, build these communities and are still actively involved in supporting each other.
Cool. How has Twitch influenced closeness in the community?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think I touched on some of that in the last bit, but I think it allowed people to make connections with each other in a way that they hadn't before. The forming of like these big raid trains and like groups of people kind of collectively streaming under kind of like a brand to kind of build on each other. I mean, I just see that as like a positive thing. I think it's great. And it's not always sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes, with any big group of creative people, like people might, rub elbows the wrong way, so to speak, or there might be drama. But I mean, you'd get that in any like IRL community too. I mean, I think, but what it really did was gave people permission to reach out to each other in a way maybe they hadn't before. And I think Twitch now allows them to express their creativity and help build a community and get feedback, from themselves, from an audience. I'll say like I probably DJ'd more, just having Twitch streams, like my skills as a DJ, like it keeps me in great practice, and I think for a lot of DJs, it's a way that helps them get those hours behind the decks to build their confidence and skills and to grow. So I think it's a fantastic platform.
The only thing I don't like about the format is when people are donating lots of money and people are shouting out during like my favorite track, it's like, no, don't shout out. But hey, like that's part of it, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it too is like learning the culture of Twitch a little bit, like I remember early on, I had a conversation with another DJ and we talked about like, I can't really think about this like I'm at a rave. And it helps me to think about it sometimes more of like a radio format where like part of my job here might be introducing music I love to people. And so helping them ID that, giving them track IDs, and not, back in the day, people used to like cover their records with stickers so you couldn't train spot them. And now I think, we've gotten to a point where it's like, no, I want people to know about these artists so they can go and support them or discover them and bring eyes on them. But also like, that thing, I try to keep that MC mentality of I try not to talk too much over the vocals, find the right times to give people shout outs, but also it's a different format than a rave. And so I'm always kind of trying to learn more about like how to meld those a little bit for my streams, at least.
I think people go to Twitch to listen to a DJ, and what they want is more of like the experience of you've got some friends in your studio there, and you're just hanging out. They're like sitting on some couches and you're just spinning and you're like, oh, this is cool, you know? And like, that's cool. Yeah. It also like, you don't have to go as hard.
Yeah.
You know? And also I think people stream for like 5 hours. You couldn't put the energy that you would into like a 1 hour headlining set at like a 3,000 person show. I don't think people can do that for 5 hours.
I mean, it'd be work.
It'd be tough. Yeah. Every day. All right. What is the future of hardcore?
What is the future of hardcore? I think the future of hardcore is super bright. And the reason I say that is we're at a time where there's, I think, more and more interest in the sound, and we start to hear the influence of the sound elsewhere. I've been around long enough to have seen like hardcore is going to be the next big thing, and then it's going to be the next big thing, and then it's, you know, like I've seen the ebbs and flows of popularity over time. What that's taught me is that I don't need to go chasing popularity if I don't want to. Like I can stick to what I love, and there'll be an audience, and there'll maybe be lean times and there'll be high times, but I think in general the knowledge that this music even exists expands and expands. We see the influence of it in a lot of places. Like, dude, on Kim Petras's last album, or the album before her most recent one, she has a track on there that's just straight up 174 on the floor kicks. It's hardcore. Pinky, who does like a lot of hyperpop stuff, released a track recently that I love it, called Big Simpin', and it's just happy hardcore. Yeah. In the drum and bass scene, there's this like speed bass sound, but it's just like 4 on the floor kicks. So that hardcore influence is out there, and I think as it gets exposed to more and more people, that just means more and more people can discover this sound. So I think it's just like a great time, and there's so many producers that are like getting their feet wet and jumping into it, and aren't constrained by the weight of it's got to sound like 1997. Like I've seen those growing pains where and even to today there's purists who will be like, well, if it doesn't sound like XYZ from 1998 or 1993, it's not like real hardcore. And I think I've heard that argument so many times that it kind of falls on deaf ears to me, where I kind of feel like it's hardcore is born out of, to me, we're going to take a little bit of that or borrow a little bit of this or get inspired by a little bit of that. Hardcore is this unique, to me, it's this unique genre where we can borrow concepts from so many other genres and find a way to incorporate it that like it'll keep on evolving and growing. And as popular music changes, hardcore is just going to continue to pull influence from that. So I think it has this ability now to always stay relevant and not be so stuck in a sound that sound, you know, is out of favor completely.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had 2 thoughts as you were explaining all of that. One is I was talking to a kid in high school, you know, it's a high school kid, and they're into alternative rock. That's like their scene. So I think because of the internet and technology, we're in an age where scenes aren't as they're not as time constrained. Mm-hmm. You've got kids that are listening to like show tunes from the 30s. You know, things like that, like vaudeville recordings, and you know, and it's like wait, that's your music? That's what you're into? It's like, yeah, because it's all there. And the other thought I had was I don't know about now, but traditionally when I thought of kind of the East Coast music scene, there was a lot more of what we would call musical historicism, where you have a track and they play a sample or they have an element in it, and it's calling back to this older historical tradition. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like inside jokes or like paying homage to, you know, the greats that came before you. And I'm definitely noticing that more with, you know, genres that used to be like the cutting edge. As time goes by, it's like now they're being sampled, they're being called back to, and also they're starting to call back to other things. So everything's getting mixed together. It's really an exciting time to be into music. It's more diverse than ever.
Yeah, and I think accessible. That's the unique thing, is like, and I think you can make arguments about, like, you know, things like you hear the argument like Spotify kind of devalues music because, you know, album sales aren't a thing anymore. You know, artists, it's hard for an artist, and I have to admit, like, if it would be a struggle if I was trying to do this and this would be like my only job, you know, was music. But I think the flip side of that is a kid in his basement who writes like a legit banger that people would love now has an avenue to get that to people without there being too many gatekeepers in the way. And, you know, yeah, maybe the signal to noise ratio might feel a little out of whack, but I think if you're interested in music and interested in certain sounds, there's a lot to discover out there. There's a lot of unique and interesting stuff to discover out there.
I think we're also in the age of the middle class musician. So I think in the old days, it was like you had a period from like 15 to 30 to become a superstar, or you'd better go and sell real estate. But I'm seeing people that are, you know, they're in their 50s, some people, and they're making good music and they're making a solid living. You know, they've got their community that supports them. They've got people that respect them and pay homage to them. And it's not as, it doesn't have to be as corporatized. There's more longevity, but it's as hard as it's ever been to become, you know, Katy Perry. Like that's still very difficult. That still exists, maybe less than it did before. Maybe it's more rarefied to become a big superstar, Super Bowl opening act kind of person. But if you want to make music and sustain yourself and like have an okay life, I think this is the best time.
Yeah. There's avenues to make that happen. There's ways for you to connect to your audience that you never had before. Yeah, it's work. It takes effort. But, you know, it's like I say to some of my friends, it's like, man, what I wouldn't have given to have this infrastructure available when I was 17 in a band. Right? Like at a certain point, I accept too, like, it's not about like me and my success. You know, there's ever growing numbers of young people, like way younger than me, discovering music and getting into it and wanting to explore this. And for them, there's just so many interesting opportunities for them to be able to put their music out there, be discovered, but also like take those first steps into the creative world, and like maybe they find where their niche is. You know, it's just like there's so many ways. Like I knew somebody in college, and they made their money off of doing TV commercial radio jingles. You know, and it's like they were in like a hardcore band, like a screaming chugga chugga hardcore band, and they toured a lot. But he also like leveraged his knowledge of recording and engineering and musicianship, and he recorded like a lot of like, yeah, we're driving trucks kind of music, and like,
oh, that's awesome,
and like made like was able to like monetize that. And again, it's like he kind of said like, maybe it's not music I love there, but I'm honing my skills in the studio and I'm honing my technique so that when I go and I engineer somebody else's band, he was a really good producer and engineer, that he could apply those skills and that knowledge to his passion work. So I think, and that was like 20 some odd years ago, you know, 18 or 20 some odd years ago. So I'm sure today there's a lot of unique opportunities for people to have their creative exploration and their expression and the music that they're passionate about, but also to make money or to find a way to bring some income in, leveraging their creative skills.
Right. Sometimes it's really nice also to make music you don't really care about because the stakes are just so much lower. Like all you have to do is deliver the truck country rock sound, you know, and you don't have to think about like, oh, am I being real?
Who am I as an artist? Kind of.
Who am I?
Yeah.
You know, what am I doing? Yeah, exactly. So sometimes that kind of work is great. Sometimes that's great.
I have a group of musicians that, in fact, this Sunday we're gonna do this. We do this activity called 20 Song Game, and there's a bunch of producers and songwriters, and we've all been doing it for a number of years now. And what we do is it's like you block out a day. So for us, it's this Sunday. And from like the minute you wake up until like 8 or 9 p.m. that night, just create as many ideas as you can. It's like just make music. And like for me, I use it to make stuff I would never think about writing. Like,
right.
You know, I in the past I did like, I made up a fake band of robots and recorded like a hyperpop EP, you know, but it's like you said, it's almost in a way kind of throwaway in that like, I'm not here for creative perfection. Sometimes some of these are just funny or they're jokes or they're just a neat idea, but it's rapid iteration of ideas. How quickly can I get an idea out and then move on to the next thing and just, bring all of my skills together for one day of just like hyperactive like creativity, and then at like that night, so Sunday night, then we all get together online and we have a listening party. Everyone puts themselves on mute, you know, so we're not talking over the music, and it's just like we just all are in chat, but we're video with each other, and we're just seeing each other get excited about hearing each other's music and laughing and like joking with each other. And it's something that the first time I did it, I was like, I don't know, like this kind of seems weird, but now like I love doing it. We do it like 2 or 3 times a year, and it's like so many ideas that eventually became songs that I released have started as these little 20 song game little sketches, because it's just the filter's off, right? It's unhinged creativity, you know, nothing holding you back. And you say yes to a lot of things you might not say yes to if you're overthinking it. You know, so I encourage other people to like, you know, do challenges like that for yourself. Like write the best song you can in 15 minutes, you know, kind of things. Yeah.
I once tried to create, it was a friend and we tried to create really hardcore like trap drill music, and we created two fake producers. One was called Butt Grinder and the other one was called Money Cat. So it was Butt Grinder and Money Cat, and we tried making trap music, and it was it was fun, it was freeing, but it was also very humbling too, because it was like, oh, this is difficult. Like every genre of music is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last one from Thomas is, what do you feel about the current rave scene?
I mean, I would have to say that, like, I am so thankful for the fact that there are still people out there, like, fighting the good fight, so to speak. You know, like, I've seen a lot of promotion companies come and go. I've seen a lot of great events come and go. But through it all, it's like there's still this constant of people wanting to get people together, curating great music, creating a great experience for people. I think that I've heard from a lot of people of kind of my generation of ravers. So I'm 47. I'm going to be 48 this year. So there's a lot of folks in my kind of age range that I've heard express, like, frustration with, like, the clubification of the dance music scene, of like the festival movement, that's not real raving. And I kind of call BS on that, honestly. Like, I think it's all valid. I think it's all in the spirit of people have an opportunity to go out to have an experience with music with like-minded individuals that can be transcendent for them, that can be life-changing for them, that can be, like, rehabilitative for them.
Yes.
And whether that happens in a club or a warehouse or a field giant festival thing, I'm pretty agnostic to it. But again, I think it's the intention, because I've been to clubs and they've been like a horrible vibe. I've been to clubs that have just been an awful vibe. But I've also been to clubs where it's been, and I'm talking like bottle service kind of clubs, that kind of like kind of cheesy kind of vibe that, like, when push came to shove and, like, the night was going, like, the vibes were thick, people were up for it, and it's like, this is what I'm here for. Like, it's moments like this that, like, give me, like, what I need out of life sometimes, and so I think there's going to be difficulties with every rave scene. Every rave scene is going to deal with, like, lack of venues. Sometimes you have great turnout, sometimes you have poor turnout. Like, I was really lucky. Like, I was getting involved with things during kind of like the .com boom era here in Seattle. So it was like great events with huge lineups all the time. And eventually that just dried up, and things went smaller and underground. But I love those small and underground shows too,
Oh, they're the best.
So it's like,
so good.
There's, for all the critiques of, like, how big or commercialized things can get, I also think that you just have to look for it, and you'll find that vibrant underground culture is still alive and well too. You just might have to go hunting for it a little bit. But I mean, is it ever going to be the same as it was in '99? No, but that's okay, because, like, I can't go back in time. Like,
it'll be something new.
Yeah, it'll be
different.
It'll be what it is, and maybe what it needs to be for a different generation.
All right, from Emma W. Name a woman.
Oh, my wife, Envy.
Okay.
Yeah, easy.
You passed the test, man. Congratulations. And this was my favorite one, and I'm ending on this. So from Sergio A, he wants me to ask you what you would rate me on a scale of 1 to 10 on, I think, the hotness scale. And then he wants me to follow up by asking you to do a spin for the camera and then saying, you're a solid 4, and end the interview. Do you?
It's pretty legit.
I told him I'd put it in the idea hat. I was like, yeah, I'll put that in the idea hat.
I mean, what I'll say, so I'll kind of frame.
So what do you think?
I'll frame this.
Just first,
I'll frame
take it all in, the whole package here.
I'll frame this in the context of, like, how I'll often respond to when people ask me what I think about, like, certain music. What I'll say is like, if you feel like it's a 10, then it's got to be a 10.
All right.
Like,
so there you go, guys. Ian K thinks I'm a 10.
Right? But actually, it's a 4.
We don't talk about magnets. No one talks about magnets. Really don't like magnets. Yeah, no. Magnets. Don't like them. No, sirree. Don't like them. No. Fuck magnets. Yes, indeed. No magnets. No, sirree.